The printing press was developed in 1448 by Johann Gutenberg and is known for altering public access to print. Was a driving force behind increasing literacy, institutionalizing literacy, motivating sociocultural change, and transforming communication. Boulter saw the typewriter as a simple replacement for replicating text, and thus it did not change anything about writing, whereas the printing press has offered a complete paradigm shift in terms of how communication can be shared, diffused, mass-produced, and enter all aspects of a person's life. The film is an interdisciplinary perspective offered through a documentary lens that examines the fundamental changes that were sparked in the field of text, communication and learning opportunities offered with the invention of the printing press.
The printing press led to the standardization of music notation. This standardization made music more accessible to people in their homes. People could read the notation and reproduce a song almost exactly. This also led way to the study of music theory and the structure of music, and how all this, how songs get put together.
I think the printing press changed communication because it changed the way we remember information. It made it really specific, and so it kind of set a baseline for what we know and how we know it. Now there's proof, now it's fact, and allows more people to have access to that information because it's stored in libraries, it's stored on different files and that sort of thing. So more people are able to get educated, and there's more, I guess, just access to the information. You don't rely on your father or mother having heard that from someone. If you want to know something, you can just go find a book and learn about it.
The art attributed more to man's progress than any other art. By means of printing, the fund of knowledge accumulated through the ages is available to everyone, rich and poor alike. Printing is essential to all education. All the other arts rely on it. Religious movements depend on it. Business could not function without it, nor could government.
You know, especially in women's knowledge and wisdom, is that so much of that never made it to the press, right? So the storytelling that you've talked about, Erin. You know, where, I mean, I've sat with women from the West Indies who talked about their grandmothers passing down bowls, because the only way you kind of knew how to duplicate a recipe was the size of bowls, because everything was, you know, kind of taught to you in that way. You make the flour in this bowl, and this is how much flour, this is how much you use, and you put this in this bowl, the corn meal, or, and then you use this bowl, right? So, and this little container. So it's interesting because none of that really has made it into text. So there's kind of, these two worlds that continue to go on, that which is told only by the tongue and held within the body, and then that which is on paper.
I think the printing press really helped us develop literacy, access to information, create books, create libraries, and look at all of the wonderful things that have stemmed from that. But at the same time, how accurate is the information when it's first put in a book, because it's someone's interpretation, and that, like, for example, the Bible. So if you look back thousands of years, people look at that as the holy text. But it is an interpretation of one person or several people's stories. And before, as we relied on oral tradition, which was the way, for centuries that we were sharing our history, and now based on the interpretations of a few people, you're creating a text that is going to be held and passed on for the next thousands of years to come. So it's a really great thing. It's fostered a lot of change, and I think there's been positive impacts, more positive than negative. People are more literate now, there's more access to information, and we're able to grow differently. But it's also important to remember, where did the information first begin?
What is so fascinating about the printing press is the drastic changes in information accessibility, the opportunities for individuals to become literate in all levels of society, and from an economic standpoint, the growth in European cities that occurred between 1500 and 1800.
The printing press, well, I think of it in terms of just this real jump in how organized we became as feminists, you know, kind of living and working in isolation, organizing, you know, on a grassroots level, not knowing what other women were doing kind of in the next province or the next state or the next county even, and how the printing press and things now being recorded and documented, and posters. I think of posters mainly, you know, posters informing you of an event, of a gathering that lets you know something is happening. So I really believe that, you know, this was a huge step forward for that kind of organic grassroots organization where, as women in the past, you know, had really been isolated in coming together and putting efforts towards whatever it was they were trying to do in their community, and working in isolation at their, you know, around their kitchen tables. And now, you know, just having kind of this feeling of being connected to others, that we're in the same situation, that we're, you know, fighting for the same things. So yeah, I see that as a real positive.
Jeremiah Dittmar wrote an article called Ideas, Technology, and Economic Change, The Impact of the Printing Press. Jeremiah writes of the impact that the printing press had in urbanization in Europe after the invention of the printing press. He found that cities that were early adopters of the printing press maintained a substantial growth advantage between 1500 and 1800. Print accounted for somewhere between 5 to 45% of city growth. Dittmar goes on to say that between 1500 and 1800, European cities were seedbeds of ideas, activities, and social groups that had launched modern capitalist economic growth.
One of the most kind of profound teachings that I've had around text and visuals is, you know, meeting the great Maria Gimbutas, who wrote and spoke 25 different languages. And she was an archaeologist who then created a discipline called archaeomythology. And, you know, she was highly respected and regarded in the field until she entered into wanting to excavate sites and study the works of matrifocal societies. And she believed that the only way one could look at symbology or uncover something like a woman who, you know, patriarchal Christian men would title, you know, woman with bread loaf, because in their mind that's what women did, they baked breads, instead of, you know, somebody like Maria who uncovered that and said women with drum, right? So she just really kind of argued and entered us into dialogue around how, you know, if you only know a certain language, you do not understand the folklore or the tales that go along with that. So there's this kind of, all this concept, all this like perspective that is missing. And so how could you uncover something and look at that symbology and really know what they're talking about when, you know, kind of your knowledge base would be so limited just to your language and your folk and those things. So it was just this really incredible learning for me about the power of imagery, the power of understanding language and culture and folk, And how just like that puts us in a whole other kind of dimension of understanding past, looking at present, and figuring out how we want to document for the future.
In conclusion, I wanted to point to the dynamic environment that existed during the invention of the printing press. As well, through interviews, my objective was to point to how we as individuals relate to the printing press in terms of how it has affected the communication strategies that we utilize, as well as how we got to where we are today. And there were a lot of other things going on that unfortunately I wasn't able to mention in the video, such as the Reformation and the Renaissance, so I highly recommend looking at how those events impacted or were impacted by the printing press. But as you saw from the interviews that were incorporated into this video, we all relate to communication as well as communication technologies and artifacts very differently. Some people being able to relate more to, for example, the music or the feminist movement, activism, religion, communication storage, and knowledge banks. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you.